I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Gary Webb. I am an investigative journalist, and in 1996 I wrote a series of stories entitled Dark Alliance, which was about CIA involvement in drug trafficking.
I knew a man who once said death smiles at us all. All a man can do is smile back.
We've opened Skull and Bone, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go
I'm
wild.
sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the rest.
Number 322.
I have duty to report this afternoon that my friend and colleague, Tim Russert, collapsed and died early this afternoon.
I may die in this cell tonight or in the arena tomorrow. I am a slave. What possible difference can I make?
And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Oh, hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another Already Dead, your favorite weekly variety, conspiracy, parapolitical show. You can choose either one of those words. It's basically the same thing, depending on when you dress it up or dress it down. But yeah, it's a call-in show. I can't remember if I threw that adjective in here. So probably about 45 minutes to an hour in, we'll take your calls, start interacting with the chat. In the meantime, we'll kind of shoot the bull with whatever we're spurging on this week or whatever we find to be pertinent information in the parapolitical world, which that's basically just the world these days. So we're in luck. We picked the right time to start a weekly conspiracy show like this.
Yes, sir.
But we were chatting behind the scenes, as always, to start off on a light note, about child sex trafficking rings.
Right.
But I guess you kind of have been picking away at some angles on some of the stuff that came up in there, because there's so much. We were talking about the Finders cult, which me and you did a series on that. For those, go check out my playlist. And I don't know if you ever did an episode on it.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, okay, you did an episode on that too. But yeah, it was wild how all these things interconnected, and it's almost like once you get to the end of this book, you almost want to reread it from the perspective, because it comes full circle, because he connects it from this sex trafficking ring to this sex trafficking ring to this sex trafficking ring, and then he gets all the way back around to where he started, essentially. And that's kind of what happens at the end. I forget how. I think in one of the Finders drops, because I remember we talked about this in our show, there was a FOIA drop that dropped, 2014 or something, in that roughly in that time space.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember now. It was
that's where the McMartinson's shit came to.
More recent, 2017 to 2019 even. It's possible it was that recent. And
that was the FOIA drop that there was McMartinson stuff that dropped. I know the author in this said that was he put that as a red herring, which I don't know, whatever. I thought it was interesting. Although I guess he's saying it's distracting you from other shit, which I guess there were addresses and stuff, and he went through some of those names, and one of those names brought it back. I forget the name of the guy, but he was the guy who had basically a bottom bitch, I forget how old the guy, but I think he was obviously his age varied, but he was kind of an older teenager, I think at the time. It was almost like his older little helper, which we've talked about in previous episodes, how that seems to be how a lot of these rings work, where they almost have the kids as they grow up in these rings. They serve a different function as they get older, into their late teens, early 20s. Yeah.
Right. They'll reward them to procure other children for the network. That seems to be
essentially
a pattern.
His guy that filled that role ended up of this fella, and he was one of the name drops in the fucking in the Finders
Did you
shit.
say the name of the book? I'm not sure you mentioned the name of the book.
What book?
Eye of the Chicken Hawk.
Yeah, Eye of the
That's the
Chicken
one
Hawk.
you're
Okay, all
referencing,
right, yeah,
right?
Eye of the Chicken Hawk.
Okay.
For those
I
who are
just want to
interested.
make sure we
Yeah,
mentioned.
yeah. But it fucking ties it right back to that, and that guy's underling. I think it was actually during the period of time he was in jail for some other shit. I think because he kept like getting through legal trouble and getting like minor infringements or just like or it'd somehow go away. But I think one of the times at jail, that guy was living with John Wayne Gacy. So,
Wow. Oh no.
and that was what like it started at the beginning of the book there, following that how then Gacy linked into other shit, and then
Oh
by
yeah.
then it comes back full circle. Oh yeah, this motherfucker was one of the names dropped in that, and you're like, oh fuck, you're like,
Jesus. So hilarious.
yeah, it is wild how that you can really connect all the dots with just child sex trafficking. That's
Right.
kind of what connects all the dots
Dude.
of the shit.
All I'm saying is that each time I go back for new subject matter or subject material, just different threads to go down some new avenue of research to bring to the forefront of my like solo projects or whatever I'm doing, just to try and learn more of how the landscape itself kind of functions, because I think that's really of utmost importance, like trying to kind of have some vague understanding of how the network is structured, so you can hopefully try and nail down at least more of a pattern that you can, once you see how many overlapping threads with the individuals who are involved within these networks, like for example, North Fox Island is basically Epstein's Island before Epstein's Island. It's kind of absurd, right? But that alone,
It was even
I
more
was
ballsy because
unaware
it was
of
straight
that
up in
story.
Michigan, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in
Yeah.
Michigan, and by the way, it was successfully covered up. At least no one was brought to account, right? Like
No one
they
knows
just,
about this shit. Like,
I
ask
mean,
anyone
that's
about
the
North
part,
Fox
right?
Island. No one knows about. Ask them about
Mhm.
Epstein. They know about it. So
Dude,
it's like that alone.
exactly. For sure. But I feel the same way about the Finders, which I remember when you hit me up and you asked me um, like you had like a few things in mind, but then you were like, if there's anything else, like suggest it, and I'm open to it. And I said the Finders mainly because I felt like it's so many people are unaware of that story in general. And I just feel like it's so important to retell that story because, again, like certain stories like the Franklin scandal, which the modern official narrative is that it was satanic panic. I mean, essentially that's the narrative. Like that. And so when you come away from the Franklin scandal and you and the official narrative for public consumption is that there was no child exploitation that occurred within the Franklin scandal, and that it was largely just a huge, right, moral panic and outrage over some cultural outrage that was occurring at the time, some sort of culture war in regard to, like, I don't know, maybe like the political spectrum, which is typically the case. But anyway, it's still kind of, I find very interesting because that seems to also be the narrative with North Fox Island, right? And so, but when you come away from the Finders and you find U.S. Customs Agent Ramon J. Martinez, and who I view as like really a hero in many ways, and I don't speak that way about law enforcement often, right? But I'm just being honest. Like he was really in charge of, which I find interesting because the U.S. Customs was a group within the U.S. Customs, which Ramon J. Martinez was a part of, that they were in charge of basically child pornography investigations because of U.S. Customs would be involved because it would cross state lines and all these different things. It would cross borders into Mexico and things of that nature. So they would they had a department for it. And Ramon J. Martinez was in that department. And so I find it all like amazing because he's just such a prominent primary source that I feel you can rely on. And especially once you consider the really the consequences of his honesty in regard to refusing to back down because of what he witnessed when he served those warrants out, right, with Detective Bradley, who was kind enough to involve him in the first place when they went to the W Street apartments and served those warrants on the finders' properties. And brother, that's one of the reports that, remember when we read it on the show, it's just like what they discovered on those properties. I don't see another way to explain it. Right?
Wasn't
Excuse it.
I forget the name of the guy. I forget. I'm gonna forget it. He's a good researcher. I forget his name, but I know there was some guy looking into it. You might remember the name. And didn't he get in contact with him? I don't know if maybe he's died since
Oh,
then.
Derek Rose.
Derek
from
Rose. That's who I was
Conscious
thinking of.
Resistance.
Yep.
Yeah. He was one of just a great reliable source for the Finders content and understanding that entire scandal, because he got a hold of the right hand man of Marion David Petty, right? What the hell?
Oh, I
was
thought
his
he
name?
got the customs officer. I forget what, Martinez. For some reason, I thought he got a hold
No,
of him, and
he
and I
got
vaguely recall something along the lines from him of like he essentially was like, "There's no point in me like speaking out or whatever."
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember he basically got a hold of one of the the right hand man of Marion David Petty, and yeah, it was kind of a extremely revealing interview that he performed with him, because
Yeah.
the guy was romanticizing what the Finders were to such an extent, and he was he was reactive as hell, like, and somewhat aggressive in the way he would react. And I think Derek did a great job in kind of trying not to overexpose that he was kind of backing him into a corner in a certain way where he wouldn't have a choice but to answer a certain few questions. And so yeah,
I am right though.
Toby Terrell, I think, was the name of the guy. What?
But does that
Oh
sound
no,
familiar to you though? That
Elizabeth
he.
Voss got a hold of him,
Oh,
I
okay.
believe. Yeah, and
Okay.
she was an investigative reporter that works for, I believe, Mint Press News still. But I know she did for a time. That's where she worked, and I don't know if any of her work runs on TLAV, The Last American Vagabond, or not. But she's done some great work with Whitney Webb as well, and Ryan Christian. And I'm not sure if she's worked with Derek Rose. It would make sense
Yeah.
because
What I was just getting at, because I'm like wondering if like there's a possibility, maybe. I don't know, maybe not us, but I don't know, the idea that it's theoretically possible that we could maybe find him. I'm not asking the audience to dox him or anything, but I don't know, between one of us or something at some point, I don't know. You'd be surprised what you can dig up. Like I've had interviews on my show. I'm not gonna say who, so people know like to go search this person up or whatever. But some important, people in some historic events that you would think like, oh, I wouldn't be able to just find them on whatever social media, but you
right.
just start looking in different, especially the more boomer social medias. You may luck up and they're like, oh shit, there they are. You add them as a friend and go from there. So I don't know. I'm just saying it might be worth the effort, because it might be, maybe he has a different opinion now, and it's like, hey,
Right.
it's not just a few reporters here and there. Like, hey, just say what
Yeah.
you got. So,
And that's exactly what I
especially when they're
believe.
older now, it might not be as big of a deal. So
You're right.
yeah.
But I think that was ultimately his conclusion, was that he was kind of black-pilled in regard to any real accountability taking place at this point. So he felt like, I don't know, it definitely seemed like he felt there was absolutely no reason to come forward at this point, and he wasn't willing to do so. And not even to go on the record at this point, which I found unfortunate, right? Because I agree with what you're saying. I think it's of utmost importance to at least continue to seek justice as much as we possibly can. I don't, whatever that looks like in its modern form, which seems to, not actually fit the definition more often than not. But anyway, it's so crazy, bro. Like when you look at, like, Tobe Terrell was the guy that he talked to, though. Tobe Terrell, I think, was his name, and he, I believe, authored the book The Game Caller, which is what they called Marion David Petty, right? Who was the head of the Finders cult. And yeah, I remember his wife was working for the CIA.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, no, I had her infiltrate the CIA to spy on them for me.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah,
fucking
wasn't
crazy.
there in the some of the Finders docs that dropped? I don't know which one. There was like reports like of them literally planning to steal a fucking Chinese kid over in China.
yeah.
Like, so it showed
Oh,
global.
100%.
I mean, there definitely
Yep.
was other stuff that showed there's a global.
Oh, there's a
but it was
lot more
wild that
than
there's
this.
literally a specific example that I think came in some of the evidence that came out. I don't know if that kid ever got saved. Probably not. But you
Oh, yeah.
know.
Yeah, and
Oh,
beyond
you know what? I
that,
don't think we talked about in our fucking series. When I was reading in Chicken Hawk, all of those kids went back to the supposed mothers. Like, I don't remember if
yeah.
we talked about that or
Same
not.
as
Yeah,
the Finders, bro.
yeah, they went back
Oh,
to the
that's what you're talking
Finders.
about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
went back to the Finders call
And they
after all of that.
returned the vast majority of the evidence that they had collected back to the Finders into the properties that they had collected the
Yeah,
evidence
there
from.
was in that. I wish I could remember the specifics, but it was heavily alluded to that there was something along the lines of like clearly could have been child porn or something like that. Clearly, given the circumstances, something you look into, and they're like, "Oh, we didn't even look at it; we just gave it back to him." But it was like the nature of what it was. I don't know if it was like film rolls or what. They're like, "Well, you didn't even look at these." Like, nope, we just gave it
seriously,
back.
No, it's absolutely insane, especially when you realize that there was like a whole area outfitted for what looked to be a sort of studio with an altar, right? But it seemed to be for the purposes of child pornography, and that's what the detective on site who witnessed this with Ramon J. Martinez and basically kind of corroborated it.
Yeah, which we didn't lean into that too much in our series because we weren't looking at too specifically from the perspective of like a network or I guess we were, but in a different way because we were more on the angle of like, what the fuck are these people doing with all this occult stuff and blah, blah, blah. And like that still is a valid angle in my opinion, but we were looking at it from the perspective. Now, after reading the Chicken Hawk one, it does, allude to more
like
being part of a enterprise of literally
international
selling
network,
child porn and and amongst
that's what they
their
discovered.
people.
That's what they discovered with North Fox Island was that they essentially they had set up a paid subscription model for pedophiles who would pretty much pay like $300 for this service where they would receive like to a shell foundation is what it was. And it was technically like some boys foundation that was right to grant themselves and their network of pedophiles easier access to vulnerable children. And what they had done is they set up like this, sort of like, we'll teach your children like kind of like some Boy Scout techniques, right? Like in survival techniques on North Fox Island, right? And yeah, they would inevitably victimize these children and utilize them in child pornography, and also snuff films is what inevitably resulted in all of this. And we know that is the case in as far as the Son of Sam. I think that was heavily involved in the Process Church and a lot of these networks.
The Dutroux victims, I think it was X1, I think is what they referred to them as. That was the one that was going on about how, and I feel but I vaguely recall there were other instances of other children reporting this in different rings or things similar. Towards like the older they got, the more likely they were to be involved in something like a snuff film or something along those lines. And even some, which I think that maybe it was North Fox Island they were alluding to. This might have been one of the places it would be happening, but literally hunts, which kind of what you think of, like fucking send them out into the woods and fucking guys in fucking old English hunting attire coming out with a blunderbuss.
Dogs after them first.
Yeah, I
and
mean
they would strip them naked before they sent them out.
Yeah, and the Dutro one, it was weird. They made a game of it, and the what she talked about is it was a game of almost like tag, and every time they had to remove a piece of clothing, and then when we got to the end, it was like then they were kind of like they were completely naked. So the idea was they could do whatever they want, and of those things being up to including death. So it was like
100%, man.
So that was almost their way to clear out the older generation, I guess. At that point, it's fucking pretty dark, but you're like, Jesus fucking Christ. I mean, I guess it makes sense. You know, you'd have to get rid of them because, I mean, one common theme throughout the book too is it was all these older boy prostitutes, and some of them that would like end up ratting or like, you know, squealing essentially. And it's like, yeah, that's a liability on your hands if you don't take care of these as they get older. Because at some point, it's like, unless you fully inundate them into your network, which it seemed to be, which is a fucked up part of this, is there were so many examples in this book of people that were like clearly were victimized, but now are the victimizers or whatever. And so it's like
perpetrators,
you know, like you can kind of somewhat sympathize to how they arrived where they are.
They become victim perpetrators, is what they become. You
but
know,
they're
and
driven through an incentive structure where it's like they do or die essentially. So it's like in certain
now, they
fucked up way,
them.
they almost have no fucking choice.
Oh
so,
yeah. Well, and they psychologically distort this sort of reward structure, right? And yeah, it's a dysfunctional relationship, obviously, but it's the way Paul Bonacci was treated, right? He basically did the same thing. He would help procure children for the Franklin Network, and yeah, it was very similar in that way, man. But that's when you realize like how these networks are actually structured. It's so sophisticated, like it really is. And mainly the problem is the amount of state influence when it comes to the cover-ups. And that's what I found so absurd about North Fox Island was the individuals who were responsible, the key perpetrators of the entire network, just got on their private jets and vanished.
Mm-hmm.
Later to be seen like in pictures in India at an orphanage with little boys on their laps.
Yeah, it was ended up being some minor player that was there that ended up catching the map, or I forget it. Like,
it was no, it's the same thing that happened with the Son of Sam, and that all. By the way, if you read the Ultimate Evil, I think he starts the book with the story of Arlis Perry and the murder at the Memorial Church on Stanford's campus, and it's insane because it's clearly a ritual killing, right? It's on Aleister Crowley's birthday, which is ridiculous.
Real quick, someone in the chat, I know we're not really in the taking questions portion yet, but it did remind me, and I wanted to hit it while I was thinking of it. They said it was Freybay 43. So does this mean The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell was actually real? Now, to be fair, I've never read that book or movie. I guess
that's
whatever
what
you're
I was
referring
reminded
to.
of.
I think that I vaguely recall there being a movie, something along those lines. It's like Hunting Men type deal, but it's like it does. There is something to the nature of the elite and then what we're force-fed in the media. I mean, obviously things like Stanley Kubrick's films really go on this hard with shit like Eyes Wide Shut and stuff like that. But it's like
because of Watergate that we're about to do, brother. I'm not trying to derail you. Go ahead, finish your thought because I don't want to derail you.
But in the Chicken Hawk, I forget the name of it. But there is a film, and I don't know if it was like an Americanized one. I think it's somewhere over in like Belgium or some shit. Maybe one of like actually, I don't remember specifically where it was. But when they were talking about the Dutro stuff, this is where they get into what the Borghese family, I believe, that shit. They bring up this fucking they bring up this this movie that this guy made or play or something along those lines that was alluding to these pacts that these elites would do, and it was like in the film, and it was like these famous people, and it's like I don't know if it actually names the people, but it alludes to with like their insignias and stuff who he's implying, and it's the Borghese family, like it's the same crest and stuff like that, I believe, in the play or movie or whatever it is, and it's like they're doing essentially some sort of pact where it's like essentially the contract is some sort of sick fucking kiddie shit, and it's like and like a snuff type thing. So that is what they use as, and the point being is like then that guy later dies under crazy weird circumstances, And this ties into the Gladio shit because this family like has strong ties to Gladio. But there's, I guess, multiple things there. It's like, for one, the idea of film telling you what happens, and then also it is as fucked up as it is like kind of, it makes so much sense, it's so genius. If you were having some diabolical or some sort of contract that needs to be sealed to the nth degree, what better way in the world to seal it than with such like the most horrible act of evil? Which, you know, in a weird way, whatever dark religion's going on in the behind the scenes, it's almost like maybe that's something to think about. Like, 'cause even you could almost imagine that devoid of a religious aspect, and just that like we're worshiping power, we're worshiping like essentially evil and what it can give us, and the idea of like, look, now here's an unbreakable pact. Like, what can bring you that other than the ultimate evil? You know what I mean? Like,
dude,
to try to wrap your head around it. You're like, I don't know. There's a lot to that. I just find it interesting the how there might be something to people who get into the mix with the elite of the artsy fartsy people and are like, yo, what the fuck is going on here, when they peek behind the curtain, and they may try to tell you a little bit, or on the flip side, flaunt it a little bit just to be like, fuck you.
It's that theme of this eyes wide shut, sort of like, just the perspective itself is the excess. In my opinion, it's clearly the power dynamic of, I can do this, so I will. And that, honestly, man, like, that is the at least the simplified version of kind of the ethical foundation of some of these psychopaths and perpetrators of these pedophile networks. Like, and I had mentioned before, and I don't think either you or Jules had seen the movie, but I had mentioned off air the Nick Cage film made in 1999 called 8mm. And I had no idea going into this movie the other night what the fuck it was even about. It was on the list on Hulu for cult classics, right? And I had just noticed that like Joaquin Phoenix was in it, and a young Joaquin Phoenix, and James Gandolfini, the guy that played Tony Soprano, and like the dude that played the nihilist in The Big Lebowski, like really good actors, right? And so I figured, whatever, I'll give it a shot. And so we threw it on. I'm thinking I'll get to chill, relax a minute, watch a good movie with the lady. And dude, this shit just plunges itself into the vein of all the fucking very darkest shit that we cover on a daily fucking basis, brother. You know, it couldn't have been closer. Like I said off air, it was way too close for comfort. Like,
I'll have to watch it later. Is the title 8mm, like millimeter?
8mm. Yeah,
okay.
That's the title. Right. And essentially it's a reference to 8mm film, which is the stock they put child porn on, brother.
Oof. Okay.
Yeah, it's fucked. It's so fucked. And what Nick Cage plays this PI. I won't spoiler alert. Like, I won't.
I have it real quick.
Anything.
I have a feeling deep down inside Nick Cage is one of the good ones. If we're going this,
I hope so, dude.
I just feel it in my soul. I know he does some funny projects and weird stuff, and you're just like, yeah, he seems like a real ass dude.
Right. Oh, for sure, dude. I know.
But I don't know. He could be all fucking linked up and fucking sacrificing children. I have no idea, but he seems cool to me.
I know. All my heroes are already dead at this point, brother.
But sorry, go on. Oh, actually, real quick, we do have a super chat in Rumble. I can't bring it up because I don't know how to link my StreamYard to it, but I think there's a way to. I got to figure that out. He said, "Yo, suptards," and it's from By 11 the Butcher. So I believe it's an 11-year-old bi child that's watching this show for some reason. I don't think this is appropriate content for you, but I appreciate the money that you got from your parents' credit card. I guess feel free to keep doing that.
Yeah, for real. Oh, shit. That's so funny, dude.
But yeah, and also I don't know if you're necessarily bi at that age. You're probably just maybe going through an identity crisis. Just, you know, find yourself, be a little more confident. Don't really feel a need to fill some niche. Just be yourself. You know.
Exactly. Oh, that's so funny, dude.
Yeah.
But no.
Oh, someone said Bill. Well, actually, I guess that would make sense. Bill the Butcher, BI11 or 11, but I prefer to think it's an 11-year-old bi child going through an identity crisis.
Oh, fucking Jesus. I love it, dude.
Yeah, and we're straightening them out.
That's so fucking cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Namrock.
Well, I guess we can do a hard segue to get out of this topic. We did want to talk about the race riots, which I don't know if you've really. I honestly, frankly, I just haven't given a flying fuck about what's going on over there. Although I guess maybe there's interesting parallels to be made. I know a lot of people are saying they're probably going to have their January 6th here soon or some shit. Although like a real last one, it seems like maybe.
Right. Because all this followed just right off the heels of their election process. So it seems like it's kind of a manufactured crisis. Like it's very obvious to me as far as like when you go through, you just look at all the headlines, brother. It's pretty much discussing how right-wing influencers are fomenting
we have a clip for this. We have a clip for this, Jules, if you want to bring that up. Yeah, if you want to set the stage for this, because I didn't watch this clip. I saw it was a good little length. Maybe it'll explain to me what's going on there. I know they're upset about the immigration crisis or something. Which, okay, yeah, I mean, yeah. What do you expect when we bomb the fuck out of the Middle East? Where the fuck are they gonna go?
No shit.
All right, we don't got no volume, bud.
And when you're in this country committing crimes on the streets or committing crimes from further.
There you go. All right, we're getting it.
Or committing crimes, we will throw the full force of the law at people. And whether you're in this country committing crimes on the streets or committing crimes from further afield online, we will come after you.
Talk to me about that, because we have seen some high-profile figures whipping up the hatred. You talked about it in there with the officers, in fact, about this being added to by online commentary. I mean, I'm even thinking of the likes of Elon Musk getting involved. What are you considering when it comes to dealing with people who are whipping up this kind of behaviour from behind a keyboard, maybe in a different country?
Being a keyboard warrior does not make you safe from the law. You can be guilty of offences of incitement, of stirring up racial hatred. There are numerous terrorist offences regarding the sort of publishing of material. All of those offences are in play if people are provoking hatred and violence on the streets, and we'll come after those individuals just as we will physically confront on the streets the thugs and the obs who are causing the problems for communities.
Damn.
All right. Yeah. Well, I guess the big takeaway, I did see everyone I think Elon actually banned the UK account.
I saw it.
I forget the reasoning. I don't know. I guess you could make a case that they're advocating for violence, because it's like over speech. So I don't know what his reasoning was, but whatever. I'm cool with it. But yeah, they've been I guess arresting people for wrong speak. Which,
the whole narrative, bro.
Yeah, they say it's like inciting, but it's like anything even racial. Right. So it's like if you
said social media can fuel real life harm, Jose.
Yeah. Someone said that was a Dennis account. No, it wasn't. Maybe. Now you got me fucking doubting myself. I swear I checked it. Remember, anytime I see something like that, I check it and I go, not Dennis. All right, cool. Now maybe I actually need to put this in my repository of things so I don't look stupid and say a Dennis thing later as if it's reality. So I'm pretty sure that wasn't a Dennis thing. We just saw a clip, so you're not getting me with that one. Fuck you. But I don't know if there's anything really meaningful on this.
Well, I think it dovetails just perfectly in with the goal and the benchmark of online censorship, the digital gulag, the Online Safety Act, for example, in the UK, right? And we're gonna have a form of this. It's just a matter of time until we've discussed it multiple times before. I do really believe that we'll have an Internet 2.0 scenario, and this Online Safety Act is just another step in the direction of the techno-fascist state. And so to me, it fits the pattern. It's perfectly on time, right? And it seems to be in the vein of problem, reaction, solution, as is always the case, right? With the playbook they utilize. And so I'm not going to fall for it, but I don't know. All I know is if you go to a protest or you go to a political rally, and I just think you're insane for expecting it to not be the primary place and the primary venue for some sort of false flag operation of some kind. So it would be in my mind, one of the most dangerous things you could do, let alone take your family to an event like that. I think it's very naive. That's all I'm saying, right? So like, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't be, I mean, clearly you should be safe in an environment such as that, but at the same time, it's irrational, especially when you realize the state of the world and the heightened tensions of the political spectrum and just the paradigm in general that most people, right, embrace and subscribe to as reality itself. It's a flawed perspective, and it's why most people find themselves in positions where they can be, right, like, yeah, of course I'm going to defend the people that weren't wrongly incarcerated after January 6th, because it's clearly there's no justice being done here. The accountability is being misdirected. Like it was another false flag to set a precedent, and then also perfectly fall into the narrative that they're attempting to facilitate, which is right that Trump is this dangerous fascist type totalitarian person, but anyway, I just see the same exact things happening over and over. And for me, if a January 6th event occurs in the UK, don't fucking go, bro. Like, I'm just saying, like, unless you're prepared for real violence. I mean, that's all I'm saying. And I'm not calling for that.
And I'm a little torn when it comes to this, but like, generally speaking, I guess I'm of the inclination that any sort of, I mean, most political engagement is usually to your detriment, and that even includes things like, like protests or specifically. So yeah, I do think it's kind of gay. I mean, like, I guess people say, "Well, what do you want us to do? Nothing." I'm like, not really. I want you to be aware of the evils of the fucking state or the actors above us, but like, to some extent, I feel like not engaging with it. Or if you are to engage it, it's to make it look ludicrous. Like, that's the only really, in like a, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. Not in like a fucking gay ass, like a Vermin Supreme way, but I don't know, more like a Ron Paul, I guess maybe. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a better example. But
I agree.
Like, and even then, it's like, to some extent, you're like kind of feeding juice into the system to some extent by granting it any sort of relevancy. Yeah, I don't know. Just a thought.
I 100% agree, man. You know, it's really like, just don't fall into the trap. That's all I'm just trying to prepare anyone who's listening for what I see to be the actual realistic threat, which is the traps being laid by the tyrannical government that is just consistently attempting to oppress us further and further. And honestly, man, like, they're just attempting to push the concept of allowable opinion to the next stage, right? And it seems to just consistently be working, which it's just, that's the sad part for me. And I do not like to lean into the black pill. We've said many times, because I do believe there's hope, at the very least, in your own individual lives. But opting out
get your shit together. You know, get your finances in order. Get a fucking family going. Like, stuff like that. Like that's to some extent, like, you need to have a realization, like, that's the important stuff. Don't get me wrong, like, here we are talking about this stuff. I find this shit interesting, but like, I feel like if you're black pilled, it's because you don't have your priorities in order. Because it's like, yeah, we're talking about these crazy things that happen, and they are, you know, things to be aware of. But at the end of the day, like, you can carve out, you know, goodness in your life while there's still being darkness somewhere else. And
I think there's
really
value.
all we can do.
Right. And there's value to, like, at least what I attempt to focus on and prioritize is trying to kind of like just bring more attention, the very best that I can, to things that I find to be important, right? And untold stories that should be more in, right, the public consciousness, just the forefront of our minds, right? Things. And so the reason I even brought up the 8mm film was because I found it so valuable to introduce that concept into pop culture. And I was unaware of it because I hadn't seen it yet, but anybody who had ever watched that film since 1999, it had to have had some extraordinary impact to one degree or the other. And I find so much value in that. And I think that people need to really devote their lives more to
like a craft.
Yeah.
Because there's something to that. Because we kind of started with like alluding to how movies, they kind of sometimes, pull back the veil a little bit for you, and whether that's intentional or not. And I guess people say, oh, that's, them, putting it in your face. But I mean, it's also to some extent, it's art that's letting you know what's going on. And so in a certain sense, that piece of art did more in a lot of ways than any sort of fucking voting for somebody or whatever, So
Exactly.
I don't really know what team you would say somebody like a Stanley Kubrick is, but like with stuff like that, it allows you to be like, oh shit. Like it kind of pokes at that, like, and in some sense, I guess it does make you feel like this is absurd and it's a movie and it's not real. But I think in another sense, it actually enters it into the consciousness as a possibility. If that makes sense. Like, I guess it's different when you're watching something like a superhero movie. Like, obviously, like that's not, but even then, to use that as an example, like I watched the latest Deadpool and Wolverine thing with my wife recently.
Oh,
and
did you?
They poked a lot of fun. It was fun. It was a fun movie. They poked a lot of fun at like the old X-Men movies and how they would only let them wear like leather jackets and stuff. Even there, like even with that going live action, when they first started superhero movies, they didn't commit. And now we're at the point to where they do commit. And a lot of people could say like, hey, it's dumb goy slop or whatever the fuck. Sure. But like point being is how it did kind of stretch what was allowable in that sense. So I think there's also there's something to that in the sense of like with them revealing these things through movies, you're like, it gives you a frame of reference to be able to understand it as being a possibility. Exactly. Although, like I said, there may be an argument to say because it's a movie, they make it absurd, but it's like, I don't know. When you see that movie and then once you start seeing, especially once you pair that up with like real life things, you're like, oh, this has some merit in reality. You're like, oh shit. Like, what are they telling me?
There's always going to be over dramatized scenes in a film. It's Hollywood. That's what they do. But it's like, I saw such direct parallels to the Roy Raiden murder, who was, they're all like just these networks of child porn producers who, like, in that movie I just have been talking about, like, that's basically what happens. Nick Cage is a PI. He meets Joaquin Phoenix, who's working behind the counter at a porn shop. And he has connections to the dark underbelly and is selling, much more extreme snuff porn, like, right. But the whole movie, I found it so strange because basically they were behaving as if snuff films didn't exist. It was a myth, right? Yeah. And so the whole movie, like, Nick Cage gets hired by this elitist family. This woman, the patriarch of the family, had recently died. And this woman, his wife, was clearly just loved him to such an extent that she basically worshipped the man. Now, her and her staff, some butler or something, and her attorney discover in his secret safe behind his desk an 8mm film strip, right? And then they play this shit, and it's just such it feels like a real snuff film. It's like kind of insane. And then they call this PI, they hire Nick Cage. He comes and they ask him to watch this. So he goes in this private room and he watches this 8mm strip, and he's just like, as soon as like she actually gets stabbed, he just fucking like freaks out, dude. It has like a visceral reaction, like you would if it were real. Mm-hmm. And then he comes out of the room and he's disturbed, but he's trying to convince himself it wasn't real, right? Mm-hmm. He's doing the best he can. And isn't that what a lot of fucking people do? We try so hard when you first are maybe exposed. It's one of a few different reactions, and I've seen it many times. And
I did want to point out, you brought up the "is it real" and like how they were alluding to it in the movie. That is in the Chicken Hawk book that was at the beginning. They kind of started off on like snuff, like kind of going into the concept of it, and he brought up multiple times in that how there have been like it's almost like the official stance, generally speaking, is anytime it's brought up as how these are almost a myth, they don't really exist, blah blah blah. But he goes throughout the book providing multiple examples of when law enforcement has actually been looking at these things, or even in some cases found them. And so it's like, while they still try to maintain this like, this does not exist, and it's like, I don't know, there's plenty to show that to the contrary. Now, to be fair, go through the book, there were very few examples of them being able to find anything to actually corroborate it. I mean, there was plenty that was enough to suggest that it's definitely real, and I think if you just put your thinking cap on, you're like, this shit's real. But one thing it seemed to allude to, and there were multiple things to suggest this throughout the book, is that they were created through commission, in the idea of that it wasn't like, you create a film, you sell it to a bunch of people, and it's just kind of like you made it ahead of time. It's like certain buyers that would request it.
Oh yeah.
So it's like,
well,
now
for sums of money, large sums of money, you could kind of be like, they would tailor things toward whatever.
Yeah, whatever it is you wanted. Like a specialized film for you or a group of people. And the point I'm getting at,
fucking movie is, Jose. You gotta watch it, bro. You gotta watch it. It's so crazy.
I'm definitely gonna have to watch it now. But point I'm getting at is what that does is it makes it so much harder for any sort of infiltration, because they even said in there that it may have or may not have actually been like. It may have already been a movie that was made prior, but you have to commission it. So there's that like illusion of you possibly have essentially, putting out a contract hit essentially. So it's like, so now how does law enforcement infiltrate something like that, where literally in order to get your evidence, you have to risk like literally hiring essentially a hitman to do awful things. So it's like, there's a quandary for the law enforcement. Like, what do you do?
Fuck out, bro.
Yeah. This is straight up in the shit. All right, got it.
Well, beyond that, William Mincer, he was referred to as Manson 2 by David Berkowitz, right? And dude, his whole fucking story was basically Mincer was a trusted bodyguard of a pornography publisher, Larry Flint, who was the founder of Hustler magazine. And he was actually the bodyguard for him during the murder of Roy Radin, who he owned this estate in the Hamptons called Ocean Castle. And they had pedophile parties there, dude. And it's crazy because honestly, they were doing snuff films. That's what Berkowitz said. There were multiple people in the van when the killings were taking place who had cameras that were set up on tripods, and it's just like to me, it's an enterprise, and it's very like lucrative. It's extremely lucrative. And once you realize that North Fox Island, not only were, by the way, I had no idea that apparently the man who ran North Fox Island, he's actually his name is Francis Sheldon, right? And he had a buddy named Gerald Richards. And anyway, they were very deeply involved in establishing a network for pedophiles to covertly distribute this child porn and way more extreme pornography than just sexual intercourse and things of that nature. Like it was clearly like violent. There were a lot of beatings and chains happening, whips, many different things. It was terrible. Basically anything you could think of, to be honest. And anyway, what I absolutely found insane is that guess who helped secure the landing strip for North Fox Island for Sheldon?
Andreas Strassmeyer. No, I'm just beginning.
Right? It might as well be at this point, dude. It's the grandfather of John Benet Ramsey.
Oh, yeah. Checks out.
You're like, what the fuck, man? So Yeah, I think that once you realize there are like deep connections to, like I said, that Arlis Perry ritual killing on Stanford University, because they said that she had been targeted and basically surveilled and tracked all the way there from North Dakota, and that and by the way, some more recent witness I found out about recently, and I had no idea that this guy even existed, but he's like this. He I believe he was a musician, and he like walked into the church that night and was one of the only witness. He was the only witness that was mentioned on the record who hadn't actually been interviewed by the police because he was never identified. And so anyway, it was this guy named Brian McCracken, and so yeah, I just kind of was listening to his perspective, and he didn't know a lot about the Son of Sam and all the different connections that were potentially involved there, but he was immediately convinced that they were performing a black mass ritual, but that the girl that he believed to be Arlis Perry and later identified, he made this all on official statements to authorities, like in like 2011, I think, something like more recent than you would ever think. And it was basically because he had a personal friend who was a police detective who was aware of the Arlis Perry killing, and had a lot more understanding of it when they were just having some casual conversation. It's a crazy story, but yeah. So this guy, he basically makes the claim that the girl that he had witnessed in front of this weird flute player with a afro wig on in that church on Stanford's campus, that the girl had turned and looked at him with some like kind of a trance-like grin, but as if she was very much a part of what was taking place. So anyway, it just provides another connection to what I think to be like, because once you realize that Stephen Crawford was the security guard who discovered her body, and when you find out that she was found lying face up on the floor and spread eagle, nude from the waist down, her right arm was pinned like under her waist, and she had been strangled and molested with a candle, and like a 3-foot candle had been inserted into her vagina, and another was forced in between her breasts, and she had been stabbed with an ice pick in the back of her head. And the police noted, though, that there was no evidence of any struggle at the scene, right? And so anyway, it's a cold case it's been open for 44 years or something at this point. And so at this point, it's probably like closer to 50. But once you realize that this security guard, Stephen Crawford, had claimed that he had locked the church doors at about 11:45 that night and had come back to check at 2 a.m. again when the doors were still locked, he was considered a suspect, but there was nothing tying him to the crime at that point. And so he was never completely ruled out, but there were no other leads that jumped out at the cops, so they didn't really like pursue them any further. So anyway, it's absolutely insane because Stephen Crawford, it turns out, so listen to this. I found this to be so absolutely insane.
Real quick, let's go. There's a lot of good stuff in the chat. I want to go over to the call-in portion real quick, and then we can. Oh, go for it. All right, go for it.
Honestly,
all right, you're good. I was like, I was prepared to go on another long tangent. I'm like, I want to move over.
No, I'm not. I swear. We can immediately transition.
Yeah.
But I do think it's at least important to finish my thought. Was basically Stephen Crawford the police were pursuing a warrant where they were going to arrest him as being one of the perpetrators involved in Arlis Perry's death, right? And her murder. And so this was Santa Clara County Sheriff's detective searching for evidence at the apartment of a man suspected of a brutal murder in Stanford Memorial Church. And so it turns out that the detectives knocked on the door. Crawford asked for a few minutes to get dressed. Thinking he was stalling, they used a key they had obtained from the apartment manager to enter the residence. Detectives immediately saw Crawford sitting on the bed with a gun in his hand. Because of the small space, they retreated. They heard a single gunshot and found Crawford had shot himself in the head, and he had a suicide note that was 2 years old. And they were attempting to serve this warrant and apprehend him as a potential key perpetrator in the murder of Arlis Perry. Now, I think he was actually just a part of it. And essentially, there was clearly a vast and much more large network that had really been behind the ritual murder. And he was just kind of facilitating the cover-up on the ground level. I'm not sure how much he was involved. I haven't really dug into it that deeply, but at the very least, isn't that absolutely insane? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Right.
All right, let's transition over to the call-in portion of the show. I do want to remind you guys that today's episode comes to you from our friends over at Nadeau Shave Co. If you're tired of that razor burn and irritation, those ingrown hairs you get from those multi-blade cartridges, these are your guys. Go back to the traditional shave. It's high-quality stuff. You can shave like a grandpa used to. Whether you're shaving your entire face or just edging up our beard, the single blades provide a barber grade shave for a fraction of the price. Upgrade your shaving system. The standard issue includes one traditional safety razor and a box of 100 stainless steel razor blades. $75 is what it'll cost you to shave for an entire year. Let's be real, you can stretch that. But, you know, some people shave more than others, so if you're shaving on the reg, you may want to consider the Quarter Shave Club, and that puts you at about 25 cents per replacement blade. You can get multiple shaves out of those. He's also got shave lathers and soaps now. I have it coming on the way. As I mentioned before, that was my bad. Didn't give my address, so I'll give that an endorsement when it comes in. Until then, I'm just raw dogging it with water. But yeah, this is go to NadeauShaveCo.com. Use Jose for 10% off your order. Let him know we sent you. But yeah, with that, guys, we're in the call-in portion of the show. I'm not going to start the calls yet. Between you, Austin, Jules, if you guys could just maybe for a second just take questions from the chat. I see Dr. Corbeau is dropping facts.
Dude, I know, I saw that.
My kiddo told me she heard some sound, so I'm going to go check that out real quick. I'm also going to exit the stream because my fucking internet is shit, but I'll come right back. That way, maybe it'll fix that. But yeah, between the two of you, if you guys want to just kind of go through the chat real quick, I'll be back, and then I'll set up the call-in. But for those who do want to call in, I'll go ahead and drop it real quick just to remind you so you can get ready to call in. 941-281-5857. Not active yet. I'll get it active as soon as I get back in here. But yeah, also keep in mind, if you guys want to support us, that you guys are able to come on as a talking head alongside us for this portion of the show. But with that, I'm going to step out, guys. You do what you do. I'll be back in like 2 minutes. All right.
Word, brother.
Bye.
What up, Jules?
What's up, everybody? It's your boy.
Oh, my God, man. All right, so Arlis means pledge, as in a pledged offering or sacrifice, says Dr. Corbeau's feel-good, fun-time medicine show. And I think that is very insightful information. It's probably exactly the case.
What origin is that?
I'm not sure. She was from like North Dakota, dude. Like just described as like some, basically some name? Arlis Perry.
Yeah, first thing that pops up.
Mm-hmm.
10-year-old American.
Yeah, it's an insane story, dude. And it gets even
it's crazy.
More
that's what her name means. It just ties into it more.
Mm-hmm.
These things, we talked about it when you came on Gray Pill.
Don't say it's Hebrew, dude. Don't say it's Hebrew.
Ritual. Oh no, I mean it could be, but these things are ritual.
That's what Dr. Corbeau just said, man.
Yeah. Oh, see, I
100% believe it. That is so funny.
Oh, man. You may be right.
Beyond that, dude, I freaking found out that apparently I guess, man, Sirhan, he attended a party at Sharon Tate's house that was thrown by the Process Church of the Final Judgment. I was like, I can't do this anymore.
That motherfucker know everybody. Fucking Robert DeGrimson, you son of a bitch.
Honestly, man.
Yeah,
no, it's absolutely crazy.
Of course. I mean, he like I said, he was hanging out with Audrey Hepburn and people that were going to Rothschild parties, and like it was pretty public back then.
Oh yeah,
You know, like
yeah. And what's his name from the Mamas and the Papas?
the whole
Yeah, he
Mamas
was.
and Papas, dude. And they were
Oh
all
yeah,
drug
yeah,
addicts, but
yep.
useful idiots.
Oh yeah.
Feel
No,
me?
they were key in the counterculture at the time. Like, obviously, man, it's pretty amazing. But I am at this point, man, I'm starting to. I don't even know how I'm shocked anymore. You know what I mean? Like, because I found out that not only
Rosicrucian.
Yeah, Amor.
So Dr.
I
Corbo
know.
said, "Good looking out, Dr. Corbo."
For real, and that's deeply tied in with the OTS and a lot of the doctrine involved with that group. And why are there such clear overlapping threads though? Right? Because to me, it has to be a part of the same belief system. Whether there are debates on certain details within the doctrine itself, or however they, what's up, buddy?
Hey,
You good?
Yeah, I'm back.
You okay?
Maybe my internet's better. It's showing is
Is your
better
house secure?
on my end. So
That's good.
yeah, my house is secure. We're good. I think it was just a cat. So I think we're all right. But all right, guys, I'll get the fucking call-in portion going
Do
for
it,
you
dude.
guys.
Dude, you missed apparently Arlis, according to Dr. Corbeau's Feel Good Fun Time Medicine show. Arlis means pledge, as in pledged offering, sacrifice, and its potential origin is of Hebrew origin.
Who would have ever guessed?
Right?
All goes back
Never would have
there
guessed that a
every
million years.
That would
time,
kill
man.
me. And
Every
then
single time.
he mentioned that Sirhan was a Rosicrucian because I found out that Sirhan allegedly went to a party at Sharon Tate's house that was put on by members of the Process Church. And also, what I was about to mention was that John Lennon and Yoko Ono, look into where they met, because you can immediately look that up. And they met at the Indica Art Gallery in London, okay? And it was run by the Process Church of the Final Judgment. I'm telling you, man, I'm starting to honestly think that
dude,
the Process
right.
Doctrine is a large network, much larger, and potentially.
Robert Grimston was a very small little player, but he was who everyone saw. And when you research it, that's really the main person that you see, but it goes so much further than that.
Yeah, but I do want to let people know that the phone lines are open, 941-281-5857. So you can call in. Otherwise, we'll just shoot the shit with you guys in the chat. Till the meantime, anything in there. But yeah, fucking, it's not cool. They be fucking kids and shit. Pretty much. I'm not a fan.
Into the wood chipper.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, dude. And I don't know if you guys remember, but from when I covered Kinkora recently, like one of the craziest takeaways from that, brother, was the child psychiatrist, the Dr. Roderick Morrison Frazier, who was like running that they called him the demon doctor, right? That was what they referred to him as, but he was an out and out pedophile and was protected by the highest level.
Did we lose Austin?
We lose Austin.
He's tripping me out. Maybe it wasn't my internet the whole time.
Fucking Matrix attack, dog.
Maybe it was his.
Am I
what
here?
the fuck? Yeah, you're here. You're here. We're good. Fucking feds are
My
getting
shit
you, I
fucked
guess.
up?
I think
Someone's
your shit was
name
fucked up.
is the demon doctor. Then I don't know. Then they have to. I don't know. Mine's.
I think I'm doing all right
Mine's
now.
fine.
So
Surprisingly,
the chat can let us know.
Fine.
Yeah.
Usually on
it's-
Schizo News Network, I have to restart it sometime. Well, I used to, but
Has my stream been interrupting the whole time?
I thought it was mine. It did like once or twice. I just assumed it
both
was
of y'all's
mine
were
acting
making
up,
the
so-
same noise. I couldn't tell.
I
whose
did
it
have my
was.
phone on accident near my.
Oh, sometimes the
What it
phone
was,
will
Austin.
cause
That's why your
interference,
mic. Yeah, that's why his mic started. It happened a couple times. But
Yeah.
no, if your name is Dr. Demon, you're going to be a pedophile. You know, like,
yeah, you're
there's no
100%.
questioning that.
Or Gary Glitter.
Yeah,
hanging out with
It's still the
Jesse
funniest one from that book. Is like, I guess
Dude.
he's I didn't even know he existed, but then you find some weird
Operation
English pop
U-
star.
What?
U-Tree,
Yeah,
right?
U-Tree.
U-Tree,
Yeah, Operation
Yeah, that was
U-Tree.
the Jimmy
Yeah, dude.
Savile umbrella.
They took down a bunch of pedophiles, and a lot of them were in like the entertainment business in England.
Oh yeah,
in
and
BBC.
Parliament.
That's why it's like they're alluding to there was some sort of BBC conspiracy, because
Chris
BBC
Moore
kind of handled the narrative the whole time, but that's like their primary news over there. Like, I don't know how it works over there, if it's
it's
state-sponsored
state-run
news
media,
or,
right?
Yeah.
Isn't that, yeah.
Yep.
That's
So-
what I thought. Yeah, that's just so insane. But to me, it's perfectly in line, because Chris Moore was a BBC journalist during the Kincora scandal, and they were entirely just, you know, derailed, and they were punished for attempting to well, first of all, they burned their source, and that's the entire reason that he lost the story, because he was actually, you know, like, his source was within the MI6 who was attempting to get this out, right? And once his name was burned from the authorities at the BBC, who just undermined the entire story by doing that, which is, I mean, it's the number one principle of journalism, is you don't burn your source like that, especially if it's that sensitive. Yeah. And it's exactly what the BBC did. And yeah, they did the same thing with Jimmy Savile. They punished the victims. They were so aggressive with the victims' families. Dude, Jimmy Savile was sexually abusing children live on air, brother. Live on air, sexually abusing little girls and little boys. It was
teenage girls.
Insanity. He got free access to orphanages and girls' homes.
Fixed it.
Yeah. Yes. And girls'
it.
homes. There's like specific stories of them knowing his smell, and from his cigar that he would never light, that he just had in his mouth all the time, and that they would just be petrified of the nights that he would come, and the headmistress would just allow him to run rampant in the halls after dark and do whatever he wanted with the girls. And he would walk into some, you know, there would be some like child foundation event that's taking place at some hospital facility of some kind or something, children's hospital, and he would just go in and physically abuse them, when like he would get them off into a room by, you know, just for a second, and people are right there outside in the hall, the door's wide open, and he would take the opportunity to just briefly assault them with like shoving his hand down their pants up against the wall. Like, that kind of stuff is what Jimmy Savile would consistently do, beyond
bring some real creepy shit to them at the same time,
beyond out and out admitting that, right? He, like, on live television on a talk show, that he like put a child in the boot of a car to bring him to the royal palace
to sneak her in.
Yeah. He was like super connected with the BBC, and like, I know there were so many of their, like, I don't know, their producers or this or that, the different positions that were like implicated as well. So it like runs through all the different nodes of the BBC and the state media apparatus.
We may want to be careful talking about England, guys. They'll
they could suck my dick.
Fuck you.
But I did want to ask you, did you catch any of that like Trump Elon space? I honestly, that's another thing I just didn't give a fuck about.
I was in
at
Cobra.
all. Huh?
I caught like the first 5 minutes and I turned it off. I was like,
I didn't listen to it. The only takeaway I got from that is that he's the biggest thing from the things I've heard going around is the thing where he was asked about the Secret Service, and he kind of, like, I guess, downplayed it and, like, you know, thank their service and blah blah blah. Even though Elon was kind of pushing like they clearly fucked up, right? That kind of deal. So I don't know.
You know what he really played up?
Huh?
You know what he really played up was the divine intervention, creating the perfect timing for him to turn and not be murdered. Yeah, I swear to God, dude. Like the storybook fairy
it
tale
plays out
version.
too well. All right, we're gonna kick you out, Jules.
Later,
Thanks
everybody.
for pitch hitting
Thanks,
for a
buddy.
minute.
Thank y'all for
We
letting me
got
come hang out.
Of
yeah,
course, man.
we got one of the supporters. Well, client number 9. What's up, dude? How you doing?
Oh, my boy.
I'm gonna
Hey.
quote Austin. He said, "Get your ass back on the show." So here we are.
Did, dude.
This uplifting talk about pedophilia. Question: have you ever heard of Victor Barnard and the River Road Church in Minnesota?
No.
Story broke on, I think it was Dr. Phil. These girls go on and they talk about how they were handed over by their parents at age 9 because this dude said that what King Solomon had many wives or something like that. And so he basically molested him for decades. And then there was a warrant out for his arrest. He fled to Brazil. He did the same thing down there. And the prosecution was a little bit slipshod. He ended up being prosecuted in Brazil. And in honor of the election with a former Minnesota governor, figured I'd toss it out there, see if y'all dug into it or not. And I'll duck out of your way.
Not yet on that one, but I couldn't believe just the overwhelming connections to the Oakland County child killer with North Fox Island in Michigan, and the level of cover up that occurred, because no authorities that could really cross international borders could pursue him or even attempted to, right?
Yeah.
Or at least really 2 of the main perpetrators in North Fox Island. And so where do they inevitably wind up? The Netherlands, dying of natural causes at 68 years old. And didn't the Netherlands come up in Concora with Dr. Roderick Morrison Fraser, the demon doctor, who also got off of child porn charges, was completely, they got him off as far as the attorney general himself inserted himself into the case on his behalf, offering up a defense for his reputation. And then the guy goes to America and gets popped for child porn in the 90s, and then inevitably moves to the Netherlands, where child porn and the age of consent is essentially 12 years old.
Yeah.
And child porn is basically legal. So
yeah, that came up in the book multiple times. That place, they're almost alluding to that was the eye.
Don't go to the Netherlands.
That's where a lot of this fucked up shit comes from, because of the
100%, man.
Yeah, so that seems that's the crux of that network.
Absurd,
there was something else I wanted to say, but I completely blanked out. There was some other connection there that I completely farted out.
What was the name of that guy, though, that you said?
Victor Barnard. If you Google or look up on Yandex or whatever, Minnesota Maidens, that's what they refer to him as. And he had this whole group of child brides. And it was explained to the parents, when you read through everything, it was explained to the parents, oh yeah, these people, they will provide spousal duties. And the parents handed over their firstborn daughters to this dude. And they were living in a campground or some crazy shit. I went down a rabbit hole on it. I don't even know how I found it. I was just, on YouTube, and you go through and all of a sudden you see the Dr. Phil clip with the girls on. You're like, well, what is this shit? And then you go on and it ended up being a transcontinental pedo ring that he was the head of.
Yeah, that's nuts. Let me read this real quick for the audience. Barnard was the leader of the River. Whoa, I can't read that. Of the River Road Fellowship, an offshoot Christian sect he founded and transformed into a cult. The 2 women who ultimately filed 59 counts of sexual assault against Barnard were the youngest of 10 firstborn daughters, aged 12 to 24, whom Barnard selected to be the group's 10 maidens in 2000. As chaste, exemplar virgins, the girls lived apart from their families at Bernard's private camp, where he secretly raped them for over a decade. Jesus, yeah, that's nuts. That's fucking
yes, I just want to add to the spice of the uplifting conversation, but
oh yeah, there you go. And then you said he got captured in Brazil, so he bounced out as well. That's wild.
Yeah.
Jesus, man.
Yeah.
And
he bounced.
By the way,
was not punished here, and
right.
Yeah.
They create these all sort of shell foundations. Some of them are named churches of some kind as well. And but what I found insane was that they also kind of utilize these religious church tax laws.
Oh yeah,
dude. With North Fox, they were basically getting government subsidies.
Yeah, weren't they running in some sort of kids religious camp or something like that?
100%, man.
Yeah.
And so they were getting paid by the state.
Yeah,
for
that's
each
who
of
was
their
busted. There
victims.
was two people, I believe, if I recall correctly, that were busted. It was
Yep.
like whoever the religious figure they had there and some other guy that was like seemed to be lower level management
Buddy that
of some sort.
was sort of running the mailing list, where that was kind of how they would run
Yeah.
this. Is they had all these pedophiles subscribing to this mailing list, where for the base model subscription was like $300 would get you 8mm film strips of just child porn or whatever. And then if you paid more, then you could get, more custom, more sadistic, more extreme. If you paid a little more, apparently you could actually like request a lot. And then on top of that, there was apparently a large sum that they would accept where if you wanted to visit the island. And I was like, oh, fuck, dude.
Yeah, for a lot of these networks, the porn was, a lot of it was almost like a promotion for, it's the idea of if you had like the red light district over or whatever in Amsterdam, or I guess, or not Amsterdam, but is that Amsterdam, the red light district? Oh, no, there's multiple places that have red light districts, but they're known for that. But either way, is if it's the same idea as if those girls also did porn, which I'm sure a lot of them do, and they use it to almost promote their prostitution. So it's like, hey, they're making money off the fucking porn, and they're also making money off like, hey, for those who actually take the promo and fucking like, oh shit, I'm gonna go over there and do this. So it seems to be how they're promoting it.
That got popped.
Yeah.
He was the one that got
And that
popped.
was the North Fox one, and it might have been him. I mean, there were so many different networks in it, but I know one of the guys who got busted for running, I believe it was one of the mailing list guys, and it might have been him.
Yep.
It was like they made a comment that like, hey, like almost like he didn't even give a shit, like kind of like whatever legally, like almost like he was implying that he probably wouldn't be that bad, and also he even said something along the lines of like, this will run fine with or without me, so like whatever.
and it was even that same network was tied to New Orleans, like some Boy Scout group in New Orleans that was a pedophile Boy Scout troop at this point. Jesus. And and Adam Starchild is connected to this, who he's a fucking character, man. You look that guy up, and he was clearly just like, they were creating homosexual pornography camps for children. Like that's what they were doing. Yeah.
This might be a Jules question. You got me listening to Grey Pill now because of this situation. That tax shelter and the use of charities and the use of churches, is that like a hermetic dark arts humiliation ritual, making us pay for our sons and daughters to be? Yeah,
Jules, if you got something, add it. But I 100% believe that, because I've read it and I've heard it mentioned that it's a way to invert the principles of the church itself, and it's to make a mockery of their belief system, and
while making taxpayers fund it. That's fucking gross.
Fuck up. And they created like 3 other corporations as tax dodges during the time, and just for fronts for the production of the gay child porn, and so it's, man, it's fucking crazy. But
yeah, so if you don't do like a 1099 for somebody's random like $10 patron thing, they're going to be at your door with a gun, that these fucking people can run around doing what they do, and it's like all good. That's too much.
Yeah.
What are 1099s?
Yeah, I don't even know what that
They shouldn't exist.
Just kidding. I fucking claim all of this. No, these are all tips, and I think everyone's going. That's the current thing. I don't know if you saw that fucking a while ago.
Agreed.
Trump was like a few months ago or something was going on about how he's gonna stop taxing tips, and then now Kamala is running the same thing. Like, okay, whatever, cool guys, I guess. Yeah, don't tax tips. So yeah,
Dude,
that's what I see Patreon as.
It was
tips.
so funny. Yeah, you're right.
Amen.
They freaking Elon and Trump. It was so funny because there was a certain part where they discussed Israel, right? And dude, Elon says he's like demonizing Kamala for the way that he said this was very telling, in my opinion. And their only real criticism, other than of course, like the borders are, and like, things worth actually criticizing. But their only criticism and their main priority as far as criticizing her was that she stood up Bibi. She stood up Bibi.
How dare she?
And then Trump responds to Elon saying that, and he says, "How disrespectful." And then they go on this entire rant about how, yeah, we have to bend over backwards and get ass fucked by a foreign government.
Yeah. Oh, do you see the Groypers are doing like a Groyper war thing or some shit? Where I don't know enough about the Groypers, but apparently they are very upset, and apparently this is a big deal because essentially he's saying he's starting another Groyper war. And the last time this happened, it was a big deal, which I forget the context of the first time, but apparently it's a pretty big deal, and everyone wants to like shrug it off, but it's like his reasonings is kind of like, you guys are sucking off Israel, and like he's basically saying like a lot of the stuff Trump was kind of embodying in the first go around is not this time. Not saying he was ever like anti-Israel or anything like that, but he was more like the stuff that the Groypers would want. He's saying that, like, for example, Charlie Kirk's to the right on him on immigration and just a lot of other concerns that people in that camp would have. So it's like, and I think the Israel thing is like really putting them over the edge too with that. So it's like, which, you know what, I'm good with it. I frankly don't really, I know everyone's like, you're crazy for voting Kamala. I'm not going to vote Kamala, but like, I also think there's just as good of an argument to say like, it's almost better if Kamala's in. But I mean, I'm not saying that, really it's like hard to say. I think that you would have a fucking stronger, conservative movement and like even more like anti-state movement under Kamala as opposed to Trump, because he kind of pacifies those forces. But so it's like almost like I feel like there's a good chance that a Trump win would just kind of like very possibly undo all the good that has been seen in the right within the past like decade, I think, or a lot of it. So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my take. I guess maybe it's a little bit doomered. I just don't really. Either way, like I'm going to enjoy the entertainment value if Trump wins. But I think from a moving the needle in the right way, there's almost better, in my opinion, might even be a better argument for if like Kamala gets in, that it moves things better. Because as soon as Trump makes some sort of move on some sort of gun thing or something, he's going to get tepid pushback from the right. Like, I mean, unless like I don't know. I think, like, if you guys saw that Rittenhouse thing a while ago, where Rittenhouse was like, "I'm not going to vote for him,"
I couldn't believe that, dude.
That's
like,
how you do it,
for
though.
you hanging out with Ron Paul.
Everyone's trying to pacify everyone on the right that's like criticizing Trump, but he is one of the most insecure like political figures in that sense of like, and willing to bend or like or distort his messaging a little, change his messaging a little bit. Like he's not one to really ever apologize or admit he was wrong, but he's this kind of person who will change. He'll slightly change position and act like that's how he always was.
Or Trump.
No, Trump. But I was getting at how Rittenhouse wouldn't. My point is getting at is how Rittenhouse essentially. He did kind of look like a bitch in how he did it, because he like said he was going to write in Ron Paul, and then within the very same day, everyone bullied him online, and then he was like, "Oh, it wasn't really, I talked to the team and they really provided me assurances and blah, blah, blah."
No, I didn't see that.
Then he said something along the lines of like, the part that I thought was a little bit gay was he's like, "This was how I was acting was unproductive," or blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, that's exactly what people in his position, anyone with any sort of, say like the Candaces of the world that clearly, lean towards Trump, but like have their principled issues against some of his stuff, say for example, like Israel or guns with Kyle Rittenhouse. Like, this is your time to be loud as fuck. Like, this is the time to be like, yo, you're fucking awful in this. So at the very least, you can get him on record saying some shit. Like, I guess Rittenhouse to get him on record, but now it's known that he supposedly gave Rittenhouse, who was not willing to vote for him over gun stuff, some sort of assurances behind the scenes. So, I mean, it would have been better if it was public, obviously, but like, hey, that's something, that's the move. You fucking bitch and moan about like, look how shitty he was on this. And then whether it's private or public, like he's not one to want to like lose face, but he, this is the time to do it. So, yeah.
He did go pretty quick though, from the strongest on the Second Amendment ever to take the guns first
Yeah.
Why do you need a bump stock?
You ain't gonna tell me. I know, man. After Vegas, I was just like, this fucking. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Like,
I guess someone asked me if I've seen Tommy G's investigation on Trump assassination attempt. Curious what you think. Honestly, I haven't really been following hardly anyone on these except for Ken, because they get so many people going so many different ways, and like Ken has just been kind of reporting. By the way, he just released. Yeah, I mean, for one, you can go check out my recent episode with him, which was like fairly current, up to like I think like a week or so ago, where roughly where we sat now. He just dropped an article that kind of breaks down all the different like reporting he's done and where we're at now with the current state of things. So between those two, you know, take your pick whether you want to read or listen to a podcast. Those both kind of give you the latest. But I haven't really been following anyone else's coverage, hardly. Maybe here and there, some little things like some like you know, gunshot analysis or whatever. I don't know if you want to. I don't know if you follow me on social media or if you want to put in the chat. If you can tell me who this Tommy G guy is, maybe I'll look into it, or something specifically you want me to look into about what he's saying. But yeah, I don't really know much about too many people's takes on this.
Is that the one? I think he might have gone on tinfoil a few times or something. I'm not entirely sure if I know who it is, but I don't know. I do know that I thought it was so funny though during the Elon and Trump conversation, because Elon proposed, he basically suggested forming this government efficiency commission, and then he offers to be, I would gladly be a part of it. And I was like, yeah, of course you would, my brother. You know, like obviously it's more about political power than actually, you know, in my opinion, I think it's about picking the winners and losers in the economy instead of actually holding government accountable for government overspending and overregulation that's clearly meant to kind of decide who, like I said, the winners and losers will be as far as, and I think that's just so very, I mean, obviously it's good messaging, and I'm not criticizing that, because I agree with the overall sentiment of obviously it's, I don't know about another government commission to hold government accountable, you know, like.
Oh, did you see Ken's latest on that about with the Trump assassination? And how the information isn't going to be released until after the election. And the two individuals, Mike Johnson and Hakeem Jeffries, are like the, I forget what their title is or what the fucking commission or whatever the fuck, but they're the ones handling it. But one key little thing that he pointed out that I thought was interesting is I guess they're now the first ones to get any sort of information. And I think they may have some sort of claims to be able to like hold on to information so that like it can't get released. So essentially everything's being filtered through them is what it seems like. You know, obviously I'm kind of speaking loosely. I don't remember the specifics of the article, just on my, you know, graze, I think yesterday or the day before. But the key point is it looks like a lot of information is being filtered through them, and they're getting the ability to, you know, release it or not kind of deal. So it's like, kind of seems like a perfect little fix. I don't know a ton about Hakeem Jeffries. I'm pretty sure he's a fucking Israel deep throater, and Mike Johnson is a fucking deep state tool if there ever was one. So like, I'm not too, between that coming out after the election and that it seems like this information is being filtered and I guess probably analyzed by them, I don't have the greatest confidence. It will probably end up with, DEI this. Oh, look how they fell through. I do want to real quick, I have a super chat from my homie Original Pistolero. He said 100% Kamala won't hit the pressure release for the right. Yeah, so that's kind of my argument to where like almost Kamala might be better, because it's like, I don't really know what Trump's really going to do. I think there's something to what the Groypers are going to, I don't feel like it's the same energy. It feels more establishment.
I think there's value in at least the percentage of people who wake up when they realize their guy didn't follow through with the promises they made. Right. I at the very least, I think there's some value to that.
Oh, with Trump being in?
Yeah.
I mean, there's some value, but I think the negative outweighs it, because I think if anything, it coaxes them into coping for it. So like by the end, they cope for like, oh yeah, that wasn't so bad. You know,
I'm with you.
And then if she wins, does she go after Trump and Elon for campaign finance fraud because of that the amount of time they spent on stream and the monetary value of it?
Theoretically,
that was a question.
Did you see that?
That was a question I had to throw at you.
Did you see the letter from the EU Commission to Elon that was like warning him not to spread disinformation during the conversation he had with Trump in the space, and basically that was kind of being used as like this, in my opinion, this elaborate way of acting as if we are being attacked. You know, like I honestly do think that it's propping up a false narrative in many ways. And I saw somebody even tweet about it that I agreed with it wholeheartedly, which was they basically kind of made this they just kind of made this parallel between the scene during The Departed when they send Leo to jail to get some street cred. So he does some actual time, some actual hard time. And I saw this guy named CJ Hopkins. I don't know who it is, but I just followed him recently because he has a few different takes I thought were at least pretty legit. And I liked the perspective itself. And he says, watch closely as one after the other, senior members of the Musk cult use this letter to recruit you. Do you recall in The Departed when they put Leo in jail for a few months to establish his creds? You are being mind fucked. Wake up quickly. And I just think that at the very least, there's something to that. You should at least consider it, because when I just view it as you're so close to the levers of power, you have so much influence, political influence. How many people watch that fucking space, bro? I mean, it's really absurd, and especially when you see like just the lack of really like actually dealing with anything that will make any real difference as far as like changing the course of the future of not only this country, right, but the structure of global society itself. And when you all you can do is point to, and you already know what I think. Where's my Roy Cohn? Trump famously said. All you have to do is know that. All you have to do is know, is it actually true that he flew to campaign events on Jeffrey Epstein's plane? Is it actually true that he didn't know and that their campaign was unaware, even though he was very good buddies with Jeffrey Epstein for decades, right? And it's just, why are so many people just so willing to embrace the political theater? That's all I'm saying. And the goal of an actor is to convince you, right? That is, and if you're a political actor, Elon Musk is doing a phenomenal job convincing people he is a genius and that he truly has good intentions for the outcome of global society. So I'll stop my tantrum.
Real quick, I do. Sorry,
I hung out too long. I didn't want to hog you guys' stuff.
You're good,
we'll
buddy.
see, but we're about to start wrapping anyways. Perfect timing.
see you,
Shut down
man.
the phone lines, everything. Appreciate you joining us, bud.
Hey,
come again some other time.
Hell yeah.
All right, see you, bud. I did want to. There's one last topic I did want to hit, but I did want to address this real quick. Someone said, "Why would Kamala be better than Trump?" Now, in a certain one-dimensional way, but you gotta think of this in multiple layers. Kamala's not better than Trump in like a one-dimensional view of just like they're generally their fucking philosophies or whatever. I'd say generally speaking, like, although Kamala seems to be devoid of any sort of actual philosophy, but I don't know. I know my buddy Clint made an argument on the show that she's pretty commie. I don't know. I think someone probably gave those talking points. I think that's at least what she's been trying to be portrayed as by talking about equity a lot recently. But I would say, so far as like, if you're looking at a deeper level, what happens anytime you have generally speaking, I mean, obviously it helps if you have like, say, the Senate or Congress or whatever the fuck is like more Republican, and then you have a Democrat in office. It obviously helps, but generally speaking, just if you have a Democrat in office, the right wing is going to be far stronger. They're going to be, because they're in opposition to what they see as like, not their values. So now you essentially have people who, in a certain more real sense, actually have control of the levers. Although presidents can do sweeping, crazy shit, when they have pushback from, the other political entities, it kind of stops them. So generally speaking, like say you have, gun control being pushed through under a Democrat president. I mean, depending on the makeup of, the Congress, whatever the fuck, like it may or may not go through, but it's far less likely to go through in that situation, in my opinion. But now when you have something like what we saw with Trump, with like the bump stocks, for example, there was almost no pushback. It was super tepid. It was just kind of like, oh, okay. And like, yeah, you get some, but generally speaking, because they vote in blocks. So it's like our Republican leader, the president, is deeming this is what we want to do. So as a block, like, yeah, you have a few standouts like the Rand Pauls, the Masseys that will say no, but right. Generally speaking, it's not going to work. And then what happens too when you have somebody like a Trump in, now all these people who have, and say he does do shitty stuff. He's shitty on Israel. He's shitty on fucking tariffs. He's shitty on by the way, I'm not even, somebody pointed out I don't see a reason to vote for the Dem. I'm not even saying fucking vote for the Dem. I'm just saying like, because I mean, I don't even think it's really worth your effort. But my point being is that I don't necessarily think it's better for Trump to be in. Sorry, I lost my thread with that one. But yeah, I'm not even necessarily trying to make the argument to vote, although that kind of in a certain sense is, I guess, if you take it to the extreme logically, is kind of making the argument to vote. But I would just say don't even waste your time. But my point being is I think under Kamala, she would probably be awful. The right wing would be weaponized against her. Now you would see, now it may be bad. A lot of people bring up like, this would be awful for the country. Sure. The country overall, that might be bad for, but what happens in these situations, like we've seen some under Biden and stuff, the states start taking back a little bit more power. At least the the red states start pulling back a little bit more power. Right. So I think this country's destined for a USSR style breakdown at some point. So I think in a certain sense, if you start creating that energy and also start moving that way, because as I was saying, the nation overall may be fucked, and maybe not even necessarily overall, but I'm just saying like in a certain sense, like the big cities, the blue areas. But like if you move to places where that's not the case, you may see something better. And I think at some point, I mean, probably within our lifetimes, we'll start seeing whether it's actually like, full on breakdown or it's just functionally they've broken up. I think we're going to see that. So I guess it's a little bit of an accelerationist argument, but not really. I guess it's because it's like I'm saying like it'll make some places better.
Yeah, and I don't want society to break down. People don't understand like like the structure of society. It's basically being derailed by government influence and infiltration into the private sector. I mean, I'm not saying that, right, like the ANCAP utopia is the ultimate solution, right? Like that's not what I'm even saying. But I think people are just under this misperception largely when it comes to their perception of the government role in general on society and what it really does play. Because in my opinion, it honestly just sabotages any real chance for prosperity and liberty. And so that to me, I don't see a real argument that I find to be very, I would say, convincing when it comes to actually trying to convince me otherwise. The role of government is so clearly to disrupt society as a whole in achieving any sort of positive prosperity in a direction that would believe, well, I guess we don't need more government influence and more government control. And so I think that people just need to just manage their concept of what government is, the role of government in general, because we're clearly being manipulated. And when someone like Elon is managing the kind of for anybody to suggest who to vote for, I just think like you need to kind of redirect your priorities and understand your role here, because in no way do I want to make that decision for my neighbor or for anyone else. And I think that that's why we're in the very situation and predicament we find ourselves, because we all have this little internal totalitarian tyrant who's so desperate to rule over their peers and enforce their ideology upon their friends and family even. And that's a losing game, my friends. And someone like Elon Musk, who's just so obviously a spook. SpaceX was founded by In-Q-Tel, man. I mean, that's the venture capital firm for the CIA. I mean, how many times do we have to see this exact same, it's the same exact situation when you look at In-Q-Tel and Marion Petty and In-Q-Tel and Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, how many different examples do we need? And but don't worry, it was just an accidental picture that he was photobombed at the Vanity Fair event post Oscars with Ghislaine Maxwell. He wasn't actually having a conversation with her about how could you erase your history off the internet? Ghislaine asked Elon. How fucking hilarious is that? You know,
Control H.
Yeah, it's like, of course you want to erase your history off.
All right, we've kind of touched on democracy a little bit. I did want to finish on one last little thing. I don't know if we touched on this in the previous show, but obviously there's you've seen how the democratic system's played out. Biden decided not to run, and then now it seems like we still haven't got a confirmation of what the fuck's going on the official side of things, but it seems like Kamala's just being ushered in as the appointed one. No fucking, seems like no any sort of actual voting process required. Which, I think both the GOP and then both parties are just actual private entities in a certain sense. In a certain sense, not really, but the idea they play the private thing, like we can do what the fuck we want. So it's like that's how you end up with things like super delegates, where Bernie got stolen from, and shit like that. But there was Biden came out recently and on some interview, and he seemed to add fuel to the fire that Seymour Hersh's report was accurate. I want to say you may have brought up Seymour Hersh's report, and the idea was that essentially what he's saying through his sources is what happened is essentially, Barack and, some of the higher connected people clearly were talking behind the scenes. We don't want him fucking running. And I guess, I don't know if it was over breakfast or if it was over a phone call or whatever, but Barack was basically like, listen here, bitch. You're not running, and if you do, we're going to 25th Amendment in your ass. And said that fucking Kamala was down to do it because I think what do you need, like a member of the cabinet and the VP or some shit. And so it's like they're alluding to they have it secured. But yeah, he said things along the lines of Biden said recently, so officially like on the out and out. He said that there were people higher ups within the the Democratic Party. They were like, hey, we think you're going to hurt them. So it does seem to allude to like, yes, that did happen, which is wild that they would threaten to 25th Amendment his ass. And that Kamala was on board. So this was like basically a coup.
It's the meme, dude.
And I'm not even saying you shouldn't 25th Amendment his ass. Like if they're theoretically, like that's what the 25th Amendment's for, but it's like the idea of using it as a cudgel for your political, advancements, as opposed to what it's intended for. And like, hey, we're supposed to do theoretically what's right for the nation here, and point out that like the commander in chief is not, mentally sound. We need a new commander in chief, which you think like, that almost, you'd think that might even be the move here soon, but I don't know. Point being is it's just interesting that it's like, Biden seems to be somewhat corroborating. Obviously, that's not exactly what Seymour Hersh said, but it makes it seem that way.
Well, and I mean, it's not at all surprising for me that like what I think Kamala serves as far as her role and the purpose here when it comes to, and by the way, Cy Hersh I've relied on for so many different things. I mean, just being the original one to kind of bring MK Ultra to the forefront during the church committee hearings, and then bring Vietnam to an end, basically, right, through his revealing of it's just like absurd how many different insane events that stand the test of time, historical events that he's been a part of, the Seth Rich, WikiLeaks, Pizzagate connections. And then I just saw Chris Hay mention the Nord Stream getting sabotaged, which was basically it was a Russian pipeline that was going to provide cheap gas to a lot of Europe, including Germany. And the CIA 100% destroyed that thing because for American gas and oil companies, I mean, it's very obvious, right? And it's it's clear as day, right? Yep. But what I definitely think is that Kamala, she serves kind of a dual purpose in my mind, and this is just my opinion, but obviously she has nothing else to run on but identity politics, and so it's going to kind of it'll serve that purpose of ratcheting up the culture war, and I mean, it's an election year anyway, so it really doesn't need that much more help. But when there's nothing else you can point to when it comes to the Democrats or the progressives who would even consider supporting her in the first place, or I guess some moderates who are entirely unaffiliated and casual in their politics or whatever. I'm not sure, but I'm just saying, like, what she does provide is all they will do is highlight the kind of the cultural Marxist identitarianism, the identity politics aspect of it all, and it'll really provide a great opportunity for her to be the candidate that loses to Trump. That's what I think. It's a viable candidate, but with the rebranding effort, at least the Democrats who are members of the cult will be on board in supporting her going into this final stretch. And then once she loses, they're buying the corrupt poll numbers. They're buying this rebranding campaign. At least some of them are. And they will perfectly fall in line while being up in arms about, oh my God, Hitler's back, right? And I think in reality, that will also be very helpful to the establishment to have the resistance back, because think of how much they accomplished as far as setting precedents during the Trump administration.
Oh,
brother.
yeah,
like,
and how they manipulated him to get everything they wanted.
Fucking A.
That's another. I didn't even bring that up in my kind of like little diatribe about like why the case that maybe Kamala in a certain theoretical sense might actually be better. But it's like under him, they essentially manipulated him to get a lot of things they want. Along the way, you get his followers that either agree with his action or then post hoc like, oh, here's why, and just like kind of cope for it. Yeah. So like, with all the Russia stuff, like how many fucking, right wingers are still like, well, fuck Russia, but I don't want to be involved, as opposed to more like friendly, like, hey, these are our, trade partners, and like, yeah, they may do some shitty stuff, but like, whatever, like, it's like he initially came in as like, we're gonna like fucking, we're gonna like have, good connections with Russia, and then immediately they then were like, you look at, he's a Russian agent, and he's like, I'm gonna show you how much I'm not a fucking Russian agent. right. Completely went against what he was going for initially.
Exactly, dude.
Yeah, so
it painted him into a corner strategically. Yeah. Like, that's really what happened. At least in many ways, that's what seems to have happened. And Russiagate was it helped do exactly that, which instead of softening tensions, he decided to double down and prove he was not in bed with Putin. It's just absurd to me, man. But
well, all right, man, let's get out of here. We're at a good spot. I think we hit all the stuff we want to. It was a fun episode. But by the way, I do want to say, I think Jules is going to teach me how to link up my Rumble, so I think I'll be able to bring up you guys' chat soon. Yeah. So you guys can start making YouTube obsolete. So.
Should I try and get a Rumble?
Well, I mean, I can only stream to 3 places, so. But,
okay, I didn't know if I should or not. I'm just.
I mean, we can also go into an upgraded version. So, but I don't know. We can talk about that behind the scenes. I don't think we'll want to hear our logistics stuff.
You're right.
But yeah, a lot of people know where they can find you. By the way, me and Austin, this will be obviously on Thursday. We'll be recording this behind the paywall, and it'll go out sometime next week. We'll be continuing our Watergate series. I think whenever we do that, maybe we need to go into Dutroux stuff, because the Dutroux stuff connects us so much. So that might be fun. Might be the wrong word for that, but good to do.
All I know is you for sure, because all I know is you brought up Kubrick earlier. My mind went straight to Nicole Kidman because of Eyes Wide Shut, and of what when he told me, "Green light, go, we're back on Watergate," I was like, all right, I get into Fiona Barnett, and I'm just like listening to her in an interview after I was reading Eyes Wide Open, and I'm like, fuck, She got trafficked to Billy Graham and raped by Richard Nixon at Bohemian Grove, bro. Like, I mean, we'll get into it. That's just just a teaser.
Yeah, it's wild. You thought Watergate was boring. It's not. Yeah,
I was like, man,
it all comes back to kid fucking always.
Dude,
so
my whole goal going into Watergate, you remember, it was, oh sweet, I'll take a brief, hiatus from the child trafficking pedophilia.
Yeah.
Little
Psych.
did I know. Little did I know. All right. Yeah, this was fun, brother. You guys can find me at the Underclass Podcast pretty much anywhere. Subscribe to the YouTube for sure. Support me on Patreon and Buzzsprout. Those are the two best places right now. And other than that, just follow my Instagram at the Underclass Podcast. And my Twitter is at UnderclassPod.
Awesome. If you guys like what I'm doing, you can find me on the No Way Jose podcast. It's on YouTube, all major audio podcatchers, and Rumble as well. That's where we stream out this show, which also streams out on Austin's YouTube channel. Definitely go give that a follow over the Underclass podcast. But yeah, I do want to give a shout out to my Patreon sponsors. You guys can support me at patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. Lowest level is $2. That gives you the early stuff. Also lets you be a talking head on this show. But yeah, for the highest levels, my sponsors, I read them off every episode. I have my co-host of Tower Gang at Tower Gang Toad. I also have at Abrogate D's, at ZOVERCK, at _Infinite Zeal, which I think he just had another kiddo. I saw him posting about it. Or actually, I don't know if he had it. I think he got maybe just a sonogram. My bad. But either way, congrats. And also Jacob Daniel of the Biblical Anarchy podcast, which I think he either has another kid coming on the way or already popped it out. I don't know. I can't keep track of him. He stays fucking at Biblical Anarchy. Then also have the homie Tim Tuttle at Jolly Klebold. And then also have Will Bell. There's this delicious blueberry wine. It's called Rabbit Eye. You can get that online. But yeah, appreciate everyone showing up today. Normally we do like guests. I kind of slacked. If you guys want to see guests on the show, best way to probably do it is social media, especially like something like Twitter. Tag me or Austin and the person you want as a guest. That way, like, hey, get the name out there. We'll try to get somebody for you next week. We'll see. But I don't know. I like these solo episodes as well. So, but yeah, with that, guys, follow me on Twitter at TowerGangJose. We'll see you again next week on Tuesday at 9:30, same time. See ya, fuckers.